So we've carried out this entire scanning methodology. We found live systems. We have two targets, 200 and 210. We did a port scan, stealth scan, and a connect scan. We looked at services. We looked at enumeration. And we ID vulnerabilities both with Nessus and with Nikto. And the same process would apply with OpenVAS as well. And that's why it's so important to just understand the process, because the tools and what tools you use come with experience after doing it over and over again. And what I recommend to most people when I train them is pick two. Pick two tools you're comfortable with and focus on those and master those two tools. And that's the key to being a professional security tester. So now that we have the vulnerabilities, the next step is we know all systems will pretty much have vulnerabilities in software as well. But not all vulnerabilities will have actual ways that we can validate the vulnerabilities. And that one step of penetration testing is validation of vulnerabilities. And that is exploit. So now what we're going to do, taking the actual just the Nikto scan, because we had the Nikto scan with the TikiWiki vulnerability, we're going to actually take that one and we're going to try and exploit it. So let's go ahead and see how that's done. But more importantly, see what it looks like in Wireshark. And Metasploit is one of the most popular tools. So we're going to start MSF Council, which is the Metasploit framework, which is an exploit framework. So we'll open another terminal window here. When we open that terminal window, we can actually search for an exploit locally on the Kali machine and not even have to go and look at Metasploit. And we just type in the term what we're looking for. So we found TikiWiki. So we do a search exploit, TikiWiki in remote. I don't really care that much about a local exploit. I want a remote one. And now we do a search and we see, wow, we have quite a few different ones. Now what I look for here is something in a programmable language like C. In this case, I got Ruby script, PHP, and text files. Now by all means, you can play with those and actually make those work. But in this case, since I don't have a C program, I just go over to Metasploit and say, well, will Metasploit help me any? So I do the search on Metasploit, and I search the same thing, TikiWiki. Now, it's telling me not built because I told you I didn't actually start the service Postgres, the Postgres SQL server. So the database cache isn't built yet. So that slows down the search a little bit. But for our case, it's not really that much of a slowdown. But while we're waiting on that, let's see if our Nessus scan provides us any other information from what we found earlier. In this case, I think we just maintain the same three. So we still have the same three vulnerabilities. Now, the VNC password's pretty easy. We could just log in a VNC client. Wouldn't see a whole lot of information in Wireshark. Speaking of Wireshark, let's go over there. And as always, let's restart it to get us a nice fresh capture to look at our network traffic. Come back over to Metasploit and see, oh yeah, it has lots of vulnerabilities on TikiWiki that have exploits. Now, the only one we want was the graph. So what we're looking for is the graph formula, and there it is. So now the way we actually do this exploit, we just highlight it. Once I highlight it, no Control-C, you got to right-click it to copy. And I just type use, and I right-click, paste, and see, I forgot the E there, so make sure I go put that in, or it's going to typo me. Now I'm in the exploit. If I type info, it tells me about the exploit and how it works. TikiWiki contains a flaw that may allow a remote attacker to execute arbitrary PHP code. All right, great. So now all I do is type show options. This tells me the options that have to be set. So you see, required yes. The only one that's not set that's required is the target address, otherwise known in Metasploit as rhost. So I just set rhost, and I put in the IP address. Now, comes down to, is it a good exploit day or a bad exploit day? Some days it's good, some days it's bad. In this case, we're trying to execute it. Completed, but no session created, so we try it twice. And the second session worked. So the first session failed, if you noticed that, but the second session did work. Now, what you want to notice here is the actual Meterpreter session that's opened is on port 4444, and that's the default port for Metasploit. So a lot of times I tell people when I'm teaching them on defense is block port 444 from the internet. Well, 44 is 4444, and block it outbound and inbound both. Because if you get somebody who doesn't know a lot about changing the actual parameter, set L port to 123. I like to use network time protocol and try exploit to try to do it again. Now I've got another session, but you see that session is on port 123. So if I background the session and I do sessions -L, that's the list of my 2 sessions. So this is a lot of information, good information actually, that you can use, but it's not part of what we're doing within Wireshark. But what I want to do is now let's go to Wireshark and look and see what we see if an attacker on our network is using Metasploit and Meterpreter. So we just tcp.port equals 4444. There's the 444 traffic. So there's the 3-way handshake. So we right click, follow the stream, and guess what? We see PHP, function exists, so we see all the PHP code. So we see all the PHP code, all that PHP code, all that information. So we have some data that we can actually reflect and look at, and then it's encrypted. So at that point, when it gets the attack in there, it becomes encrypted because the Meterpreter shell is encrypted. All right, so you're seeing in here, my print finished, and then that's where it actually gets into that actual graph formula, and it encrypts it. And remember, we had 2, so we could actually clear this, and we could do TCP.port equals 123. All right, so now you see, even though it's not network time protocol, Wireshark doesn't know that. So now you see what hackers can do. They can pretend to be a protocol that's allowed, and your monitoring devices will think it's actually that protocol unless they inspect into that protocol directly. And that pretty much is hacking like a pro and looking at Wireshark as you observe different hacks. So now not only do you how to do actual network hacking because you've learned all the protocols and things throughout, you've had an introduction to how a hacker would actually do an attack and going through the live systems, the scanning methodology, live systems, ports, services, enumeration, ID vulnerabilities, exploitation, and also what it looks like in Wireshark. So we've taken it the full circle. Remember that one step, exploitation or validation of vulnerabilities, that's penetration testing. So now go out, practice, and work through the process. Once you have the process, play with the tools. I always like to get 2 to 3 tools and master those tools, and it makes you an actual professional security tester. And that's it. Enjoy.